Folks, we'll get started in just a minute. Thank you.
All right, well, good morning. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning for the very first Democratic-led House Veterans Affairs Committee Roundtable of 2026. Happy New Year, everyone. I do expect some of my colleagues to be showing up throughout the roundtable. So as they appear, I will introduce them. Last year, we hosted a series of 10 roundtable discussions highlighting issues faced by veterans and their families. Issues that I frankly believe are not getting the attention they deserve. And so those conversations not only contribute directly to our oversight and legislative agenda, but they also serve as an opportunity for us as members to hear the opinions of veterans and advocates who we don't often hear from. In 2025, we hosted 2 roundtables to discuss the persistent issues facing toxic exposed veterans, along with other hazards faced by their families. Later in the year, experts, including researchers, physicians, and surgeons, joined us to educate us about how profit-driven healthcare is negatively affecting quality, cost, and access to care for veterans. At another roundtable, we discussed the risks to veterans' data privacy that arise as a result of concerning changes to VA policy and the use of emerging technologies at VA. In November, we hosted a roundtable hosted on veterans' benefits, and today's discussion is a natural follow-on. Today, we add to this list of roundtables, and I'm grateful that we're joined by advocates who are committed to protecting the veterans' earned benefits from scams and frauds, another topic that I believe we must be paying more attention to. Sadly, veterans are prime targets for fraud due to their access to benefits, military service history, and culture of trust. Scammers often use imposter schemes, fake charities, pension poaching, and investment fraud to steal money and personal information from veterans. Such tactics, particularly those of romance scammers, routinely ruin the lives of veterans, of individuals, including veterans, by exploiting emotional vulnerability for financial gain. Fraudsters have gone as far as claiming to be VA officials to trick veterans and their family members into handing over their personal sensitive information. This behavior is frankly deplorable and unconscionable. The Federal Trade Commission estimated that in 2024, they received over 210,000 consumer reports from veterans, service members, and their families, with losses totaling nearly $600 million. These reports and losses have risen steadily over the last decade and are likely to increase as many safeguards that veterans rely on are diminished by the Trump administration. Perhaps even worse are the frauds masquerading as legitimate enterprises worthy of a veteran's trust and time and money, like for-profit schools, multi-level marketing schemes, and claims sharks. So I will continue to advocate for legislation like Congressman Pappas's GUARD Act, which restores criminal penalties for unaccredited agents who go after veterans' benefits. In addition to being ranking member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, I serve on the Education and Workforce Committee, where I work to protect veterans' GI Bill benefits by defending the 90-10 rule and scrutinizing predatory for-profit schools. Sadly, it seems that even when we take steps to thwart bad actors, new tactics arise. It's like playing whack-a-mole. I'm concerned that the growth of artificial intelligence has accelerated the threat of scams and fraudulent activities facing the military and veteran community. Schemes using AI to co-opt the credibility, imagery, and narratives of the veteran and military community to gain access to disability and retirement benefits, government information, and community networks. We need to strengthen oversight tools to combat bad actors, but we are sadly seeing the Trump administration destroy the very institutions tasked with preventing Americans from being scammed. I am exceedingly concerned about the continued degradation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The CFPB is responsible for supervising and handling complaints against institutions for unfair, deceptive, and abusive actions against consumers. Since its inception in 2008, CFPB has returned more than $21 billion back to consumers. That's billion with a B, which includes hundreds of millions of dollars to service members and veterans who have been impacted by violations of the Military Lending Act. Without a fully staffed and funded CFPB, I fear that bad actors will evade accountability and that frauds against American families will grow unchecked by oversight. I am grateful that Rohit Chopra, the former executive director of the CFPB, is here with us today to tell us more about what he worked on at the helm of that agency and during his time as FTC Commissioner. Welcome, Mr. Chopra. Thank you for granting us the honor of your presence today. I'm also extremely pleased to have Mr. David Case, the Deputy Inspector General of the Department of Veterans Affairs, with us today. Thank you, Mr. Case, for being here. The Office of VA Inspector General is on the front lines of fighting fraud and scams against our nation's veterans. So I very much look forward to hearing about the Inspector General's office and their ongoing work as well. I just see that we've been joined by Congressman Pappas, who is the author of the GUARD Act. Thank you, Mr. Pappas, for being here today. We're also joined by Eileen Huck, National Military Families Association. There you are. Michael Filioli. Michael, I think I said that correctly, right? Filioli, great. Veterans of Foreign Wars. Jeremy Villanueva, Paralyzed Veterans of America. There you are. Michael Fimano, Vietnam Veterans of America. Ali Armisen. Thank you. FightCybercrime.org. Will Hubbard, Veteran Education Success. Kayla Williams, Vet Voice Foundation. Kayla, welcome. Gretchen Peters, Alliance to Counter Crime Online. Gretchen, thank you for being here. Scott Hope, Disabled American Veterans. Scott, thank you for being here. And Stephen Betch, from the American Legion. Stephen, welcome. Now, many of you are frequent participants of our past roundtables. I recognize many of you. And some are here for the very first time. Either way, I look forward to a fruitful and frank discussion today with you all. I appreciate you being here to share your insight. And with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Case, Deputy VA Inspector General, for some opening remarks. Mr. Case, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the VA OIG's efforts to prevent and address fraud. Our work focuses on fraud schemes that damage VA programs and diminish the services and benefits they provide to veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. Looking around the table, I am honored to be joining so many organizations we have worked with over the years to safeguard VA resources, taxpayer dollars, and the welfare of the nation's veterans. I'm looking forward to today's discussions. The work we do in this area is primarily conducted by our criminal investigators, yet it is driven by sophisticated data analytics, hotline complaints, OIG fieldwork, and referrals from VA and congressional offices. Our investigators examine allegations of fraud and related crimes, including medical, education, and benefits fraud committed by contractors, outside entities, VA employees, and beneficiaries. In fiscal year 2025 alone, our investigators pursued more than 150 criminal fraud cases involving these schemes with U.S. attorneys across the country. Our agents ensure that our fraud alerts and online fraud toolkit provide veterans and VA personnel with the information they need to report suspected cases to our hotline. In addition, our agents provide fraud awareness briefings at medical centers and to other VA personnel. An example of the benefits of the education of VA personnel, a VA employee tipped off our investigators to one of the largest fraud schemes related to a vendor selling medical masks to VA that would never be sent. More recently, our investigators disrupted a pension fraud being committed by a charity founder and 4 employees, costing VA $20 million. Just this month, a man was sentenced following a joint investigation our special agents participated in, involving a man who neglected his uncle, then hid the dead body in a shed behind his house to fraudulently obtain $1.8 million in his uncle's disability benefits, a quadriplegic of the U.S. Army. The impacts of fraud are both costly and deeply personal to veterans. Investigators also work closely with our audit teams that are assessing weaknesses in VA controls to prevent individuals from lining their pockets with payments meant for veterans or the exploitation of department resources for private gain. If an audit team suspects fraud, they are trained to immediately turn it over to the investigators. And if the investigators find vulnerabilities in programs, they share that with our auditors for possible follow-up work. Together, they help ensure veterans receive the care, services, and benefits they have earned. For example, in May 2025, 10 individuals were charged with defrauding the government to obtain VA disability benefits. The investigation was advanced by OIG investigators requesting that OIG audit staff with expertise in VA benefits operations review disability claims to confirm there were indicators of potential fraud committed by the perpetrators. These collaborations can lead to systems-level changes. For example, we work with this committee and SVAC in digitalizing DBQs so that both VBA and the OIG could more easily track businesses and physicians engaged in the exploitation of veterans and guard against fraud. There are some long-standing fraud schemes that we have been addressing for many years, including various healthcare-related scams. We've engaged with DOJ officials about schemes in which VA or veterans are billed for medical equipment or services they have not requested or needed. Services do not meet quality standards or are not provided as promised, and care facilities or providers that are not properly licensed or credentialed, among others. These are not victimless crimes. We have worked with the VSafe office since its inception and other VA personnel to coordinate our activities. We hold periodic listening sessions with VSOs and other stakeholders to help gather information on emerging schemes. We welcome collaboration. In just the past year, we have joined a coalition dedicated to stopping counterfeit goods from flowing to VA and participated in a DOJ-led multi-agency effort that resulted in 300 defendants being charged for various healthcare fraud and opioid diversion schemes. We hope to do more with valued partners. Ranking Member Takano and other members of the committee, thank you again for the invitation to this event, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Case. Mr. Chopra, thank you for being with us today. You have the floor.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ranking Member Takano, and all of you for being here. It's great to see familiar faces over the past 15 years working on all sorts of issues, whether it's mortgages, student loans, auto loans, all sorts of things where veterans and their families are getting into financial trouble. Let me just make 2 points, which I really want us all to think about. It is important, obviously, to crack down on individual perpetrators who are really doing the defrauding. But we should be honest with ourselves that going one by one against them in an increasingly digital world, especially where it is easier and easier to mask your identity, we should be rethinking our enforcement strategy and policy approach. When this was happening in the 1960s, where people's bank accounts and checks were being misused, we decided we can't just go after one individual check fraudster or the next 1,000 or the next 1,000. We got to create policies and laws that align the incentives right. So what did Congress do? It passed a law, the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. When your account is being debited or some sort of electronic means of taking money, they put responsibility on the bank to make sure they are checking and guarding against fraud. We have all sorts of ways in which we prevent money laundering, other crimes this way. It can't just be one by one. We have to think systemically. But now, I think there's really new ways in which fraud is being perpetrated, and it rests on the platforms of the biggest technology companies on the planet. Many of them do not really have any responsibilities when it comes to fake accounts, when it comes to using behavioral targeting, and when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence, the cloning of biometric information, including voices and even faces. We need to update our laws to make sure that there is some responsibility for those who are profiting from trafficking this type of fraud. There has been some analyses recently that just on Facebook's properties, Meta's, various Instagram, others, an enormous source of advertising and targeting revenue is actually coming from various illicit activities, including the targeting of active duty service members. So I think it is now for us to think collectively, do we need to change some of our laws? And I loved what you shared up top about the GUARD Act, but is there more we can do to make sure that the people profiting off of fraud are not just going to be subjected to one-by-one investigations, but that we really think systemically? Before I close, I just want to share that we have seen a lot of agencies really up their game over the past 15 years to actually be responsive to veterans, active duty service members, their dependents, survivors, and others. But what we see right now is really no enforcement at all. The CFPB and FTC have not brought a single enforcement action on the Military Lending Act or related to abuses in the VA mortgage program or GI Bill related. I mean, the list goes on and on. This, to me, feels like Congress passes laws and outside of the Constitution, they have found a way to just stop enforcing that. I think that means you too also need to think about what do we do to make sure that federal agencies don't have a monopoly on enforcement. Maybe that means we need to amend our laws to give state attorneys general, and in many cases, private citizens, the ability to vindicate their own rights. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion, but my hope is that we think about holistically how to find the core vectors of fraud, whether it is happening through AI, foundational models, other social media platforms, financial institutions, so that we can holistically attack it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chopra. I'd now like to open up our discussion to all participants, but before I do that, I'm delighted to mention the arrival of more of my colleagues, Dr. Dexter, Maxine Dexter from the state of Oregon, Ms. Brownlee, who appeared before her, I should have mentioned her first, who is the ranking member of our health subcommittee, and Dr. Conaway, who is our member from New Jersey. Both, Dr. Conaway, by the way, is also a veteran. So thank you all, my colleagues, for appearing at this important roundtable. Now, I know some of you around the table have joined us at previous discussions, but I'd like to remind everyone that our session today should be a conversation. Each of you is welcome to speak on any topic that arises today. If you'd like to speak, just simply turn your tent card on its side, and my staff will record your interest. Mr. Chopra, perhaps you can start us off. I greatly appreciate your perspective here, and I'm curious about your thoughts on how and why bad actors choose to target veterans, service members, and their families.
Well, I would also defer to others as well. Here's what we have learned, especially since about 2012. First is that active duty service members, because they skew younger, as soon as social media and other digital technologies became more ubiquitous, it has become easier and easier to exfiltrate a lot of demographic and personal information about service members. So you can actually go, if you're even a foreign government, you can buy from data brokers information about service members, veterans, and their families. There has been some reforms to stop some of that, but in some ways the genie is out of the bottle. You're able to figure out who is really looking for romance, who is looking for a car, who is actually in financial distress, and this allows you to assemble sophisticated targeting techniques to know who is in a state of mind where they may be baited in. So we have seen the use of this kind of data broker list services. For example, you can purchase lists of people that may be suffering from diminished capacity. This is one way in which older adults are frequently targeted. You can actually sometimes purchase lists of individuals who are young veterans or service members recently divorced. You can find ones that have maybe looked at a payday loan website. There's all sorts of ways to do it. I think that has been a major increase in the ability for crime rings to be able to use a more tech-forward approach to their criminal activity, and is why I'm so glad you raised at the beginning of this that we should be thinking about also the privacy, surveillance, and data protections in addition to just the bread and butter fraud part. But I think that's a big piece of it.
I'm going to call on Ali Armisen in just a moment, but I never know when my members are going to come and go, and I want to take advantage of the fact that the author of the GUARD Act is sitting to my right. And right now, you mentioned in your opening remarks so given that we've seen an absence of the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, in its efforts to protect veterans and citizens generally, the FTC, they've been failing to bring a single case this whole year. That's very unusual, is that not right? So California right now is considering a major consumer protection bill for veterans, and it addresses the claim shark issue to protect veterans, to put some teeth into California law to protect the numerous veterans that live in California. I'm afraid to say that the lobbying efforts on the claim shark industry are very effective, and all eyes right now are on California. Can California enact strong laws to protect their veterans as consumers? That's going on right now as we speak. Can you comment on the 3.5 million veterans that were made eligible for very generous benefits under the PACT Act and relationship to lists and data brokers and how that translates into claim shark operators being able to take advantage of the targeting of veterans? Yeah.
I think others may know about this better than I do, but I would say that once the PACT Act was passed, there was actually already out there in the digital underworld knowledge about who might be the ones who could benefit from it. And that really led to those folks being besieged with various types of offers. And we have seen this in other contexts too. This happened to those who were first responders at 9/11, once there was benefits. So I think just to speak to what you're saying about the California law, I really want to always encourage our members of Congress to keep an eye out for efforts to do what's called preemption. This is the ability to hit delete on state laws that protect consumers or protect the public. And I think we should be encouraging state laws, and we should also be amending our laws to trigger more state attorney general enforcement over some of these key statutes. But I would really defer to others on the specifics about the PACT Act targeting. I certainly know that digital technology was really part of that, though.
Well, thank you. Chris, do you have anything you want to add to this before I move on to?
Well, I would just say I'm grateful for all the VSOs and players that have helped bring some of these issues to our attention, including issues around claim sharks. There's been a real education, I think, of Congress, and we've built some momentum behind our pretty simple bill, which is just to reinstate criminal penalties, to say that if you're not accredited, then you should be abiding by the law, and there should be some reasonable limits on what organizations can charge veterans. But we've seen veterans become a huge profit center. We've learned a lot through the media as well in terms of the tactics that are being deployed by these claim sharks, including reporting from NPR recently that talked about a VA hotline and how that was being utilized to find veterans that have had a change in their benefit status as a way to target those veterans specifically. So these guys are getting really sophisticated. They're trying to stay one step ahead of our ability to really hold them to account. And so I do appreciate the efforts state by state to help take some steps forward in the absence of action in Congress here. So I think this is an ongoing conversation, but I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chopra, just about thinking about this systemically. Congress is often at the end of the line in terms of finding out about fraud. We may hear about it in a one-off basis from a constituent. We learn about it once VSOs are sort of made aware, but we're not the tip of the spear here, and we're oftentimes playing catch-up to learn and to figure out how we can best respond. So I think taking a look at the bigger picture here is going to be really important moving forward as these actors get more sophisticated and are utilizing technology in a really insidious and powerful way against veterans. So thanks, but I'd love to hear from the other folks at the round table.
Thank you, Congressman. So what trends are you all seeing and hearing from your veteran membership and advocacy and research? First off, Ali Emerson.
I'm new, thank you. So I did want to call attention to military spouses. I am a veteran, but I'm also a military spouse. The military spouse has to move often every 2 to 3 years, right? So every 2 to 3 years, you have to find a new job if remote work isn't available. Your resume looks schizophrenic at times. So when you are looking for a new job, you aren't necessarily in the top of candidates. So you become desperate, right? You're looking for anything. You're looking for any job. You want to contribute to your income. And so there comes the job scam, right? So sometimes, yes, the military community is targeted, but sometimes we're good targets. And so you fall into a job scam, and now you don't have a job, and you've paid money or lost information to this scammer. So I did want to call attention to that because, yes, veterans and active duty are being affected by scams, but also so are military spouses.
Thank you, Ali. Gretchen Peters.
Hi there, good morning, and thank you for having this important hearing. I want to actually respond to various things that have been said so far and add some of our own work about our own research. First of all, there is such a need to provide training and education for military families, and a lot of what is being done right now is being handled by NGOs, volunteers. Our organization sends volunteers, has been invited on multiple occasions. This is a very resource-thin environment to help people understand the risks that are out there, in particular for the elderly, in particular for young people, and as Ali mentioned, for military wives. I also want to violently agree with what Mr. Chopra said about a systemic approach, and to make the very brief comment that while I'm incredibly grateful that this roundtable is taking place, these are not threats that are unique to military families. There are unique issues that military families face and veterans face, but this is something that is harming all Americans, in particular elderly Americans, in particular children and young people. We have got to update the laws in this country to the digital age. And one of the issues you referred to is, to be more specific, is that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, a 30-year-old law that was passed in February of 1996, will turn 30 next month, gives platforms a liability shield for user-generated content. That has effectively become a gigantic subsidy to the tech industry, which they have used that extra money by flooding Congress with donations. And I think that has played a big role in preventing reform to the law. Every other industry in this country operates under a duty of care to keep people safe on their premises. Try and imagine any other industry that could roll out new products, AI products or other anything, any new social media app that could roll out and be tested on the public without going through safety testing. Try and imagine Boeing or Toyota putting a new product out into the public without having some sort of regulatory agency overseeing it when we know there are dangers. So, and let me be specific to some other things that we need specifically for veterans. It's absolutely true that veterans get targeted, so do a lot of people. But one very specific way that our military, members of the military suffer online is because people trust members of the military. They often have their identity stolen and used to scam other people, whether in romance scams or in investment scams. This has happened to some incredibly senior flag officers in this country. General Casey, General Petraeus, a former director of the NSA has been a target. One of our members, Brian Denny, who runs an organization that fights this issue, was told by Meta that he is one of the 3 most popular identities used in romance scams. If they're able to track this at any given time, if you go onto Facebook and type in Brian Denny and hit return, hundreds of profiles of him will come up. They know this. They know this, and in fact, Meta, just to give you an example, and other platforms are able to do this too, they actually have an internal scam score. They can tell if within 2 weeks of a new account being up that they think it's a scammer. But do they warn people? Do they say when a recently divorced or widowed woman starts speaking to somebody like that and starts communicating with them every single day, did they send a warning saying, hey, you're speaking with somebody who's actually located in Ghana, even though they claim to be on a military base in Syria, where we're not even fighting a war? The tech companies can be regulated to warn people about this. And I want to come back to the fact that this is an issue that has as negative impacts on the person whose identity has been stolen as on the people who have been scammed. I can just speak to you about Brian. His life has been ripped apart by this. He has literally not got, and this will sound funny to you at first, but it is not funny. He has literally not gone a week in almost a decade without having to break up with somebody that he's never met. You laugh, but breakups suck. But it sucks even more when it's somebody who has lost their entire life savings. It sucks even more when the person doesn't believe you and then starts attacking your wife. It sucks even more when they start trying to communicate with your kids. He's had to move into a gated community. I mean, we're talking about serious, serious impact to just his life, and there are thousands of people like this in our military community who are impacted by this. The irony is, the same group that Brian is the co-founder of started putting out advisory messages on the internet, on TikTok, on Instagram, with videos of the real people saying, I will never ask you for money. I will never ask you for money. Guess what the scammers are doing? Now with AI, they're using those voices and they're using those videos to scam other people. In some cases, they're even pretending that they're from the NGO to raise money. All of this can be stopped. We just have to outlaw it. We have to put a responsibility on the platforms to stop it the way we did to banks when banks were making the same arguments in the 70s and 80s about why they shouldn't be responsible for dirty money passing through their systems. And we passed laws, and now that is widely considered a responsibility of the banks to make sure that when somebody sends money to somebody else, that it is a legitimate transfer. But we don't do that to tech platforms when you set up an account. We allow them to be anonymous. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. My understanding is that Mr. Denny, who you mentioned, was invited to be here, but he couldn't make it, and that's why you're here instead. And so this is an incredible story you're telling us. Let me turn to Eileen Huck. Eileen?
There we go. I think I'm set, thank you. And I wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for including the voice of families in this conversation. I think that's very important. I wanted to follow up with what Ally said in her comment about military spouses. And you had referenced, Mr. Ranking Member, MLMs in your opening statement. And just to reiterate that it is incredibly challenging, even in 2026, to build a career as a military spouse and to find a profession that is compatible with the military lifestyle. And so military spouses are often very attracted to these MLM businesses that can be, that are mobile, portable, can be taken to your next duty station.
Excuse me, Eileen, just because the portions of this hearing may be made to the public, MLM, just sort of...
multi-level marketing.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that. So to the extent that we can support military spouse employment in reputable businesses and professions, we diminish the risk that military families will be targets of these kind of businesses. I also wanted to add, my son is an active duty Navy JAG officer, an attorney for the Navy, and I mentioned to him that I was going to be participating in this hearing today, and he said, thank goodness. Tell them that they need to reinforce the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because legal assistance offices are being inundated by service members who have been victims of predatory lenders. My son tells me all the time about young service members who are basically targeted by car lenders, taken to take out probably their first credit card and then taken directly to the used car lot to put their first used car fully on their credit card, and then there they are, having to pay thousands of dollars on a credit card that they weren't really prepared to take out. Service members, young service members, are more likely than their civilian counterparts to have a mortgage, to have a car loan, to have a credit card, and they do not always have the financial expertise or knowledge to make the right decisions when it comes to taking out those obligations. The CFPB and the Office of Service Member Affairs have played a vital role over the last decade or more in protecting service members and military families from these sorts of predatory lenders, not just through enforcement, because that's vital and essential, but also through educating service members and their families about their rights and the laws that protect them. And in the absence of a robust, well-funded, and well-staffed CFPB and Office of Service Member Affairs, really the service members have very little recourse. And that was what I wanted to emphasize also, that there isn't currently another entity with the expertise and the jurisdiction to fill the role that has been that is of the CFPB and the Office of Service Member Affairs. Installation legal offices do not have the capacity, the expertise, or even in some cases the jurisdiction to take on these cases. And so what I would say today, take as our main takeaway, is that there needs to be a commitment to reinforcing, both in terms of staffing and funding, the CFPB and the Office of Service Member Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen Huck. Thank you so much. Will Hubbard. Thank you for coming, Chris.
Takes a minute. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I'd like to provide our thanks to you personally. Nobody's been a stronger advocate for the 90-10 rule and defending it in Congress than you and your office, and so we appreciate that. It's an imperative element to make sure that veterans and their families are protected, so thank you for that. I just wanted to highlight that point. Unfortunately, the reality is scams infiltrate every part of veterans' benefits. Low-quality programs are absorbing an enormous amount of GI Bill funding while producing poor outcomes, and this is despite the repeated warning signs. Just to understand some of the scale, for example, 8 of the 10 largest post-9/11 GI Bill recipients from 2009 until 2017 accounted for 20% of all GI Bill payments, totaling $34.7 billion. 7 of those 10 schools had a high volume of student complaints and faced state and federal law enforcement actions. So we know there's issues. Many even showed completion rates under 28%. Think about that. 3/4 of them, roughly, were not even finishing the program that they signed up for. Yet $34 billion is being pumped into these bad programs. Education fraud targeting veterans follows a repeatable, well-documented playbook once GI Bill access is granted. That's an imperative point. I'll come back to that. There are a number of schools that I'd like to highlight, for example, that have accounted for hundreds of millions of dollars of enforcement actions, including Retail Ready, Fast Train, the California Technical Academy, and still on the books, American Intercontinental University and Colorado Technical University. We know these are bad programs, and yet VA continues to pour money into their programs. Just to give you a personal angle on this, I want to share some quotes from 2 veterans in particular. One California veteran who attended the University of Phoenix said, they enrolled and finished their degree from University of Phoenix. No jobs seemed to even consider this degree. I was told it was an accredited school. No mention of internships while I was going to school, no assistance with job placement or contact from anyone after the degree. It seems like you're kicked to the curb as soon as you're done. And another, Jenica King, an Army veteran, shared, I used my GI Bill to attend Ashford University. One reason I went there was they stressed that they were military friendly and that my GI Bill would cover all of my tuition. I would never have gone to Ashford if I had known that my GI Bill was not going to cover all my tuition and that Ashford is unfriendly and unhelpful to military veterans, especially those experiencing injuries. These are the words of 2 veterans who had their lives upended by this experience. Fortunately, Congress can prevent all of this harm through existing statutory changes that would protect veterans and taxpayers up front. For example, at minimum, require basic quality standards, including first and foremost, simple outcomes. Look at the outcomes. That should tell you everything you need to know. Second, establish an automatic process to restore GI Bill entitlement when fraud is confirmed, and give people a second chance to go back and do what they intended to do the first time. And finally, add a risk index, timely caution flags, and full complaint histories to the GI Bill comparison tool so that people don't have to experience this to begin with. That's how you preempt that harm. I'd like to double down for the probably 5th time at this point on Rohit's point about this being a systematic issue. Going after one-off schools is not going to solve it. We have to hit the root cause, which is having stronger standards and making sure that individuals don't have to experience this problem to begin with. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Will, for all your work over the years on this issue. I have to say that I'm also pleased that my colleagues on the Education Workforce Committee, when we did have the majority, did work through, we waived jurisdiction so that the Education Workforce Committee could put some teeth into the 90-10 rule. Rohit, you seem to keep wanting to jump in.
Make sure to double down on the fact that we also need to make sure that the VA is also pulling its weight when it comes to overseeing some of this. I think we've all been pushing for that. And I don't have a lot of faith in this VA to do it, but I think it's important to lay the groundwork for there to be a VA that actually is caring about all this money that is going out. I think we experience many people coming to us saying, I use my GI Bill, it's all to waste. I now have to start again. I'm taking out now all these student loans. There's a sense of sort of real robbery that people feel, and the worst part about it is that some people internalize it as, they always told me I was too dumb to go to college. And I think that is something that, I don't know how to put a price on shattering someone in that way, but when we turn a blind eye to some obvious exploitation of public funds, and the Office of the Inspector General also needs to be doing more to see whether these schools are being policed as well.
Dr. Conaway?
So when this loss of entitlement situation occurs, Mr. Hubbard, what does the veteran need to do, or what can't the veteran do that he should be able to do or she should be able to do when these situations occur? Does there have to have been because I'm thinking the schools will say, well, we didn't defraud you, we didn't do this, and they are able to escape, justice, quite frankly, escape with having done wrong to the veteran. How do we help vindicate what they have, their losses, when they get into these programs that simply don't provide? It is fraud, certainly. It's certainly a consumer fraud. If you say you're going to do something and not do it, that's treble damages. There's money there for a lawyer to take on and get some redemption for what's been lost to the veteran. So can you comment on that process and how we can help restore these veterans who've lost so much?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's an imperative one. There are two elements to this. There's the post facto market-based outcomes testing that can be done. So seeing if people are getting jobs. If the answer to that is no, well, obviously it's not a valuable degree. We've seen that in a number of cases. And then on the front end, to ideally prevent that from happening to begin with, there would be minimum standards to ensure that people don't end up in that situation to begin with. For example, requiring professors or teachers to have some qualification in their field. That seems pretty common sense. That's not required for VA programs at this point. You can pull a person off the street to teach any given course, and there is absolutely no requirement. Or, for example, requiring that the school is not going to financially collapse the next day. There's no requirement for that. A school could literally take in GI Bill dollars and then 2 weeks later close up shop, and there's no recourse whatsoever. So those are some basic, there are some basic standards that could be put into place to prevent this from happening to begin with. But to Rohit's point, I actually want to make another element to this, because we hear from a lot of students that are basically at the end of their rope, who have gotten to the point where they're like, I just need help to get out from under this mountain of debt. My GI Bill is gone. I have student loans. What do I do? And there's some degree of embarrassment. Like, how did I fall for this? There's an important thing to realize. These are professional scammers. These are experts at being psychologically manipulating to the most vulnerable people in the most vulnerable points in their life. So there's no shame in anybody who's been scammed out of this, and that's an important element to realize, and really encourage people to come forward so we can stamp this out.
So Wildo, how do you want administrative reinstatement to work?
There are processes at VA right now that somebody could get their GI Bill back under very limited circumstances, for example, school closure scenarios. So there's already vehicles in place to do that, but it does not allow for anybody who's been scammed to apply for that. So if there was authority provided to someone who was outright defrauded, for example, if a court of competent jurisdiction determined that an individual was defrauded, they should be able to get their GI Bill back. Right now, there's no authority that exists to that end.
Yeah, Dr. Conway, under Title IV of the Higher Education Act, there is a specific statutory language that allows the beneficiary of a federal student loan to assert as a defense. And I think they can get their eligibility for Pell Grants back, but I don't think
It's called borrower's defense, right?
Yeah.
Borrower's defense, but it does not apply to GI Bill recipients. That's a real shame. I just wanted to say that I came to Congress outraged right after the Great Recession to see billboards in my district, my congressional district, which, $10,000 a month at least. the only ones who could afford to put those up were the for-profit, low-quality institutions. And the commercials that were running on television at the time were targeted at single moms, people, low-income folks, people who had lost their jobs. And then when I discovered that there was a connection to veterans, that veterans had a particular target because of the 90-10 rule, the target was that veterans benefits, the GI Bill was not counted as part of the federal. So 90-10 says that a school has to demonstrate that at least 10% of its revenue does not come from the federal government. So veterans benefits were not counted toward that 10%. So it perversely incentivized these scammers to actually target veterans because they could take all that veterans' money, a considerable amount of money, was it $20,000 a year at least, as revenue, but not have it counted as that 10%. That was the importance of the 90-10 rule. And it fired me up for my first few years in Congress. We were able to get that addressed, I'm happy to say, but we should have restitution available to veterans who have been, as you said, sophisticatedly manipulated and have those. If Americans knew that people who put their lives on the line for this country, and you think about who goes into the military, first time, people who've not had access to college or university, and to see them scammed this way, Americans would be completely outraged if they knew the whole story. So anyway, we need to hear from more of you, Michael Fumano.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. This is something that's incredibly important to us. Obviously, you think about people who are vulnerable to tech schemes. We have older veterans. We have people who aren't that tech savvy. We have people that are socially isolated into an age group that isn't exactly ahead of the curve on a lot of these issues. And so it's a huge issue for us. We find that shifting the blame, all these schemes, at the end of the day, the veteran is the one who ends up paying the price. And that's why we support Congressman Pappas' GUARD Act. It's the first attempt at actually trying to go after the people who are perpetrating the crime rather than throwing the veteran through another arduous and painful process of having lost their life savings, their pension, whatever it happens to be that they fell for. And you think of it, it's almost like we're downriver and we're pulling veterans out of a river and we're not wondering who's throwing them in the first place. This is something that we have to be looking at who's behind this. And I love the idea of state attorneys general, getting involved in this, and whichever comes first. We honestly, are a big agnostic on that point, as long as something happens, because this happens to a lot of people. One of the big problems is such a huge chunk of veterans are not even signed up for the VA. So while I appreciate that they have, fraud explaining seminars and trying to keep veterans on the, the other side of being a victim, unfortunately, they're not going to know about that unless they're enrolled in the VA, and that's why that's been such a huge push. I can't tell you how many of our members, their wife happens to be going through her email and she says, honey, weren't you in the Navy? It says something here that you could get X amount of dollars. It's going to cost this, but, it's money that you weren't having before. So, of course, you're going to say, well, I'm not getting it yet, so why do I mind if somebody takes a slice of it? We fully believe that people need to be accountable for how they're getting, these are basically people who are filing paperwork for you and taking all the benefits. And it's horrible. I mean, as you said, you could imagine these people who go abroad and they fight for our ways of life and they come home and they're victims. It's awful. And, especially we're talking about identity theft. I mean, most of our members, if you talked about voice and face spoofing, they're going to think I'm speaking another language. So, especially, this is all generational problem, obviously. We don't have many people taking up the GI Bill right now, but, this is a system-wide problem, and we really do need to shift this from losing your benefits or paying back pay if you get caught, rather to persecute the people who are victimizing these vulnerable people who either don't know better or they're trying to get benefits that they have deserved and haven't gotten for years. This is something that's incredibly important to us. So I really thank you for holding this, and to Congressman Pappas for introducing the GUARD Act.
Thank you very much, Michael. Jeremy Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. And again, I think we agree with everything that's been said here. I think we're all just hitting on the same points. And if I could just, I don't know, I think it's been double tapped already, but triple tapped. There's a few things I just wanted to point out and why this is so important. And the urgency could not be, more timely. We have been parts of working groups, my colleagues and I, and we've brought in experts on things like mortgage fraud, benefits fraud, education fraud. And the things that keeps on popping up is that the people that are doing this, and Will said it succinctly, these are professional scammers. But what we have to realize is that when a law comes out, they are reactionary. There will be a lull, and then they'll find something new. There will always be somebody out there who finds a loophole, who finds a way around, and uses it to defraud veterans. That is an ongoing thing, and it's something that we have to remain vigilant of. Because of that, the CFPB and the FTC have to be fully funded, they have to be staffed, and they have to be doing their job. Because their name says it all, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They protect, because by the time these laws come out, again, it is reactionary. The people who think up all of these things are the ones that are going after one thing, not the betterment of veterans or the betterment of people. They're going after money. And by the time a law comes out, people have already been victimized. The CFPB is supposed to be out there ahead of that to make sure that that doesn't happen. Stop it before it gets there. So that's my first point. And that goes across veterans benefits, that goes across education, that goes across all of these different things. There's always going to be someone who's looking to make money in a nefarious way. The other thing too is when it comes to the GUARD Act, there has to be teeth, because as we've seen, these folks don't care. Again, their job isn't to make themselves look good. It's not to help veterans. It's to make money by any means necessary. When you have a business whose whole business model is predicated on the veteran getting a higher rating, that just leads to nefarious things. That's on its face. And the fact that you can go on, and this is a little test that's just so disheartening to do, but if you go on the old Google and you put in VA claims, VA disability claims, the first thing that'll come up will be va.gov, all the different, hey, this is what the VA does for you, here's an explanation, DAV's on there, and then that's it. But if you go VA disability claims help, you will get an entire page of sponsored ads with every single one of what we would call a bad actor, or pretty much everybody that the VA has already sent a letter to saying, like, you're really walking that line from getting a slap on the wrist, and getting another letter. A whole page of that. Because they know, hey, we got that extra money. And as long as we spend money, we're gonna make money. Just like the billboards that you saw along, probably along the 5, driving up and down California. It's the exact same thing. But again, most of these veterans, when they're looking for disability help, they're not gonna go and see a billboard, they're gonna Google. They're gonna look for that. And if that's the first thing that pops up, that is a shame. And that is just leading to them being victimized. And then the last thing, and one thing that I'll constantly bring up, is it comes down to the education of the veteran. The veteran is not gonna understand what they are entitled to. That has been an issue that we bring up when we talk about transition. That is an issue that we talk about when it comes to putting in a claim for when they start looking to go to school, all of those things. The veteran doesn't understand what, the VA has for them already, right? And there's easy steps that we can do, and I think that the VA has done a really good job of trying to do that. But I think that there's easy lifts, expanding on the Solid Start program and asking them simple things. Are you represented by an accredited agent, right? Are you looking to put in for a disability claim? Do you want to know the information? But are you looking to put in for to go and get education at some point in time? Simple things like that, because they're already reaching out to them. We have to stay on top of this. The unfortunate thing in hearing from our colleagues that the FTC and the CFPB have not done pretty much anything doesn't mean that the crimes are not happening. I think we all know that. And the thing that has not been said is that it's going on right now, and there's going to be a blowback from this. Has to be, because it's not like they just decided to take the time off. So when that does happen, we would love to see Congress and, of course, our colleagues jump on this, because it's going to be catastrophic. There are people being victimized right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Dexter, you have a question.
I do. Thank you all for, it's so deeply disturbing on every level. It's just, thank you for bringing more light to this. As a doctor, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Case, one, deeply disturbing to know what, these claim sharks are doing and how paid medical exams, record reviews, nexus letter pipelines are all tied to these claims coaching. I also experienced personally as a community physician, having veterans coming in asking me to share medical information with groups that I didn't know any better and was probably assisting in the fraudulent use of their records and their illness severity. It was completely something I was unaware of. What does the OIG's office need in terms of exploitation of veteran health information to help not just fight this on the individual level, but also to help expand knowledge throughout the community care networks and others to not allow us to be manipulated, physicians to be manipulated, and also to keep these networks from profiting off of the veterans' care and their benefits?
Can you turn your microphone on? Is there a microphone?
Got it here? There we go.
Just move it closer, yeah.
Yeah, okay. From our perspective, we're trying to be tech forward in our work. I've heard that term used. We have a very sophisticated data group that is investing in AI with our criminal investigators. Now, I can only go so far in describing what they're doing, but to keep up and stay ahead, and part of that effort is to find linkages to some of these organized, broad themes or groups that are trying to do this. And I think we're being more successful in that. Some of the cases we've brought look at not just one-offs, but people who are taking advantage of groups of veterans. In terms of the medical community, I think there we need to be proactive in education or recommending education to VA and the VA providers and third-party administrators that work with community providers on what the risks are in sharing this information. The IG's authority is limited by the IG Act, and we're basically either law enforcement or auditors and physicians looking at VA provision of services. So there's a limit to what we can do, but we can recommend particular types of outreaches to VA and as a part of our product of doing investigations or audits or inspections. So, but it's a issue that I'm glad you raised.
Up on that, do you feel like the IG's office getting more resources to do enforcement and education is helpful, or is that better with CFPB and substantially investing in more for the Office of Veterans or Service Members Affairs?
Right. I mean, if you think of it as a zero-sum game, our mandate under the Inspector General Act is to look at the operations of programs of VA. For the CFPB and FTC, they're looking at the consumer and focusing there. So how Congress or others choose to direct those resources is I'll call it a political choice. And so, I mean, from our perspective, what we're trying to do going forward is work smarter, be technology forward. Our agents have formed their own group to do research. We do the same in the audit, and we cooperate with other federal agencies to have force multipliers to our work. HHS and other agencies that are involved in the healthcare system, we work with them and their IGs. So we do all those things to try to force multiply the dollars that we do get and go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Kayla Williams. If you wouldn't mind, Kayla, just you wait. All right, we'll follow. Kayla, go ahead and we'll follow with Ms. Brownlee's question.
Ranking Member Takano and other members, thank you so much for including the Vet Voice Foundation in the conversation today. And I do want to mention that we also support everything that's been said here so far today. Really appreciate all the great points, and I don't want to be duplicative, so I wanted to shift a little bit to talk about a different type of scam that is also targeting veterans, especially the most vulnerable veterans. We know that having sustained a brain injury increases your risk of falling for fraud. We've seen some for-profit schools that have actively targeted those with traumatic brain injuries. And another really disturbing element of this for me is the push for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT, for mild TBI and for post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite the fact that GAO reports, VA and DoD systematic reviews, and independent systematic reviews have all shown that HBOT is no better than sham at treating these conditions. These are also not treatments that are risk-free. It's not just a sugar pill. There are legitimate risks of these treatments. The FDA does not support the use of HBOT for these conditions. I will admit, while I was looking into this, I did find one study that supported it. It was funded by the Hyperbaric Institute, and the lead researcher works for Harch Hyperbarics. So we know that these folks, they know what they're doing. They are trying to extract taxpayer dollars by going after veterans who are desperate for relief. It's not just HBOT, it's also supplements, which are not regulated by the FDA. Low T clinics pushing testosterone for folks experiencing the normal effects of aging. Chiropractic care for traumatic brain injury, also no reason that would make any sense as a treatment for a brain injury. And then psychedelics, which may show promise, but need to be effectively and fully studied. And yet you can read about organizations that are charging veterans $8,000 or more to take them out of the country and give them unregulated psychedelic drugs in settings that we do not know how safe they are, taking them in group settings. All of these are ways that folks are trying to scam veterans by taking advantage of their desperation at having symptoms that they've not gotten adequate relief from. I want to make one really important point, which is that the medical benefits package specifically excludes drugs and devices that are not approved by the FDA, except for clinical trials and compassionate use exemptions. And unfortunately, we see these scammers targeting Congress to try to get workarounds with legislation that would mandate that VA cover HBOT fully or with pilot programs. And I really want all of us to stand up against that effort to work around existing legislation in order to try to rip off taxpayers and take advantage of veterans by pushing these supposed treatments that really are doing nothing other than scam vulnerable veterans. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kayla. Ms. Brownlee?
I apologize that I had to leave. I had one vote in transportation that I had to go to. So everybody knows how long it takes to walk from here over to Rayburn and back.
I know that-
There was-
I know that walk very well.
Yeah, I did not stop at any point in time. But, so I'm just wondering, Mr. Case, you were talking about, identifying the linkages, and you're pursuing that effort right now. I'm just wondering if is there any information that you can share in terms of what you have uncovered so far? And once we determine and have some agreement on linkages, is that the starting point for a piece of comprehensive legislation in terms of moving forward?
I can say we're not legislators, so I don't know what the starting point is for legislation. What we'll do as we develop potential linkages and develop evidence is we then work with the Department of Justice to look at bringing actions across jurisdictions and involving other OIG criminal enforcement groups to basically take on a larger group that is systematically taking advantage of either the healthcare system or the VA system or other systems. There was, law enforcement people call it a takedown of over 300 people last year who had been systematically basically diverting drugs, selling counterfeit equipment, taking advantage of veterans and many others, and abusing funding from the government for health care. So the process is, as we try to develop it, and other OIGs and the Department of Justice, FBI are doing the same, and see these broader groups working, then we have to work through the law enforcement process, the U.S. Attorney's Office. But I think that now, and over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen more and more engagement across the law enforcement agencies to bring people to justice who are perpetrating broader efforts at taking advantage of the healthcare system generally, including the VA healthcare system.
Is there a universal depository for, once we understand who some of these fraudsters are, that we collect them? I mean, it should be public information, I would think, out there would be, that's not going to solve the problem, but it would certainly help.
I mean, our work,
Is your microphone on? Just make sure it is.
Yeah.
It is, okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, from our perspective, we approach this particularly from a law enforcement perspective.
Yeah.
So until indictments are brought or guilty pleas are done, but there is significant law enforcement sharing of information, and that's one of the things that our law enforcement directorate is very proud of, and rightfully so, is their work with not just the Department of Justice, but other Office of Inspector Generals and other agencies, whether it's HHS, to pursue law enforcement avenues, to share information, and that's not just on the law enforcement basis. Our data groups work with their data groups, and we basically work to get the best results that we can for the American public.
So, I mean, just for the rest of the folks here, though, I mean, what do you think of an idea of having a depository of folks who are committing fraud? I mean, there's a whole group of you who are doing these investigations, and you're certainly aware of them. Law enforcement is collecting and sharing information, but we don't have access to that information. A veteran doesn't have access to that information. Families don't have access to that information. I mean, maybe this is a bogus idea, and if it is, just say so. But it seems to me that at least that would be a starting point to share information with the people who potentially can be victims of these crimes to avoid certain agencies, nonprofits, whatever they call themselves, who are committing these crimes.
There's a lot of precedent for this. Some of the agencies, for example, maintain lists of banned debt collectors. When I was CFPB director, we put together a repeat offender registry that would require those companies engaged in repeat offenses to be in a public database. We have tried for years to have the VA and the Education Department publish the list of schools that have been caught and found by a court to be engaging in these violations. I think this is actually very worthwhile, and I think, though, it can also be done administratively, and we should be pushing the agencies to publish this information. We should not be making individuals search through PACER court records and decode LLCs in order to do this.
Ms. Brownlee, if I'm hearing you accurately, it's sort of like what the County Department of Health does with restaurants. There's a notice every week or every month in the local paper that says this restaurant was downgraded from an A to a B or was closed down because of cockroaches or whatever. So that there's a way for consumers to know whether or not that's a reliable place to go and have dinner. But if you're going to go to a for-profit, or look at what schools, look at what advice groups or advisory or advocacy groups you're going to go and seek representation from. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be something that's posted on the website so that veterans have not to say that the website is that easy, but would have easier access, to that information. If a family is gathering together to figure out what they can do for their loved one, they can go there and get that information to avoid doing business with a criminal agency.
It comes back to question standards. In residency, I was a clinical professor. We had, particularly for overseas schools, United States schools had all gone through an accreditation process. You could safely recruit from there. But overseas, there was less information. And so you had, before you even admitted someone to the hospital or invited someone in for an interview, you had to be on that list. And if you're not on that list, your residents, your students won't be able to enter a residency program here in the United States. So there are precedents for this that are used now very effectively to protect consumers, patients in the case of medical training, but it can be applied very broadly and ought to be.
Well, thank you for that line of questioning. Scott Hope. And I saw your,
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for holding this today. Greatly appreciate it. I want to kind of get back to the PACT Act and the 3.5 million veterans that opened up the aperture of veterans benefits healthcare. When that happened, and the VA did a pretty good job of publicizing it and saying, hey, we're bringing all these folks into the fold, that put a target on every veteran's back, right? Because veterans don't know what they don't know. When they say, hey, could the PACT Act possibly include you in its new legislation? Veterans thought, yeah, possibly, maybe. So it took all of those veterans to kind of put everybody into a group like, hey, I got to find out more information. I think the VA needs to really take a lead and be proactive in protecting the veterans in their space. We're looking at the Department of Veterans Affairs moving more into electronic records, more into electronic notifications. Now, we all know electronic notification is ripe for a phishing or scam. So if the government's mad at you or wants some money or needs to tell you something, they write you a letter. Everybody knows that. If veterans are starting to elect into electronic notifications, we need to be very sure that the portal where they log into and are reviewing decisions and taking action with the Department of Veterans Affairs is secure. And they know it's secure at vets.gov, and it's not some hyperlinked blast message that could be very easily copied by a bad actor. We see all the time on Facebook where it's not just veterans that are targeted, but they'll ask the top 20 questions in a fun little thing like, oh, your the color of your shirt and the first name of your middle school is your TikTok dance name, right? Well, now they have a piece of information. They're collecting that all day, every day. And if it was as easy to get a hold of the Department of Veterans Affairs as it was to get into contact with one of these bad actors, we would shut this down almost completely, except for those very large entities that are held accountable as a group, such as schools and those bad actors. But when you look at something, as broad and wide as claim sharks, that's why the GUARD Act is so important, is to hold those people accountable and actually put some teeth into it. If I can charge you $18,000 and all I get is a $5,000 fine, I'm going to still make money. I'm going to still keep moving on my business model. And it is super frustrating as VSOs who work with veterans every single day. When you receive the 526 easy for a new claim and the respondent burden is 25 minutes, which means a veteran should be able to sit down themselves or with somebody else and fill out that entire piece of paperwork in 25 minutes, and someone's going to charge them tens of thousands of dollars to do that simply because they didn't know. It is completely offensive and it's egregious, and veterans should not have to deal with that. So I really think the VA needs to be part of the conversation. Maybe the VA SAFE Act, that office, with their ability to track, could be a big part of that. I do also think that the healthcare fraud associated with the claim sharks is an issue as well. We have suggested, much like a veteran has the Quick Submit portal, where they can directly transfer information from the Department of Veterans Affairs from any computer. If you're going to do a disability questionnaire as a private provider, they should have a similar portal where that provider is known, tracked, their facility is tracked, and their license number is tracked. Now, you can plug all that into some AI and just start seeing the patterns, right? Because it's inappropriate. It is inappropriate as it would be for a veteran to walk into his or her VA examination set up by the VA through a known contractor and hand them a $500 tip. That choice to hand them a $500 tip or not is as inappropriate as it is for somebody to be paying a claim shark to go do those same things. So I think the VA can really, tighten it up, be the lead on this, protecting veterans' information, protecting DBQs that are forward-facing, which is ultimately paid to the veteran and the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Just to, relevant to what you're saying, I do have a DBQ bill which would force VA to develop tools to detect that sort of fraud. So, that is in the pipeline. Perfect. So, thank you. But thank you for your comments. Michael Filioli.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Great to hear about that DBQ bill that you mentioned, because last year I asked in the last administration if there was the ability for VA to detect fraudulent DBQs, and I was told no. So really appreciate that, some work on that front. Ms. Brownlee, to your point, I think we all agree that that would be a marvelous idea, because I know in a number of meetings with VA, we have asked for that a number of times, a reporting system. And we were promised prior to this administration that that was something they were going to develop. Again, no fruition, no action. I think with you bringing that up today and mentioning it to the group, I think that's a positive step. Like the Ranking Member said, if you go into a bad restaurant, you probably want to know it's pretty bad before you get in there. So I'd like to know that too before I realize I've got to hand over $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 to somebody who's not accredited and is just going to sit down and charge me that money to fill out a form that I can fill out myself because I was in the government and I can fill out last name, first name, middle initial, all for free, instead of having to pay somebody. So thank you for that. With the chopper, to your point, funding and staffing is quite important. To your other point about moving things lower to the grassroots level, to the state level, 44 AGs signed off on a letter to prevent claim sharks in the last couple of years, and only 9 states out of 50 have passed laws. Their lobby is big and it's strong. We've got to work harder, and we've got to do more to make sure that our veterans, their families, service members, and survivors are not continually taken advantage of. So I think we would back that and definitely like to continue that discussion. Mr. Case, 150 cases out of how many thousands? We've been talking for years that you need more teeth, you need more money, you need more funding, and yet we only have 150 cases brought forward. And I thank you for doing that, because that's probably 150, 300, 500, however the tree of the pyramid goes, bad actors that have been removed from the situation. So thank you for that. We're willing to work with you to do more. We talk about VA putting more messaging out there. At some point it becomes noise. I must get 100 messages from VA a week, newsletters, bulletins, and they're great. I mean, they're there to do what they do, but at some point people stop reading them. So I would ask that as we move forward, we work with our NGOs and our VSOs to help amplify that message, because when it becomes noise to somebody in their inbox, We have dedicated channels. We have social media avenues that we can use. And for me to say that, that's funny because I don't have any social media at all. Thankfully, I'd be terrible at it. Thank you. And when we talked about the claim sharks earlier, I had one call me last week and asked me if they could bring their Nexus letter model to our national convention and show it and exhibit it to veterans so they could get their VA claims done. And obviously the answer was no. So I thank you. As you know, we fully support the GUARD Act. We are anti-claim shark. You touch a claim, you've got to be accredited. That is all there is to it. With the BFW yields back the floor.
Thank you, Michael. Ali Armisen. Ali?
Thank you. So my organization helps primarily those who have been severely scammed. And when I say that, I mean romance fraud, crypto investment fraud, identity theft. In 2025, if you are a veteran and you came to us, you most likely were affected by a crypto investment fraud, also known as pig butchering. If you don't know what that is, you know, yeah. Pig butchering, so I'll explain it, ma'am. So it's a long-term financial scam, right? They will reach out, the criminal will reach out through social media, through dating websites, a random text message. They will get a relationship going, right? They will gain trust. Several months go by, and then they just casually say something like, I'm investing in crypto, and oh my gosh, my returns are amazing. Are you interested, right? And by now, trust has been gained, and so the person no longer Googles, right? This individual no longer looks up the information that they're getting from this criminal, and they say, yeah, I'm interested, and they start out with a small amount of an investment, $20, $100. Great returns on this fake crypto investment site, and the site will even let them pull the money out, right? So the individual says, oh my gosh, I can pull the money out. Of course this isn't a scam, right? They wouldn't let me pull the money out. And that's when the big money gets sent, and really essentially they're just sending this cryptocurrency into somebody's wallet, the bad guy's wallet, right? And we know that once money is sent through crypto, it's gone, right? So if you are a veteran and you came to us, this was the crime you were affected by. So that being said, 41% of the people that we helped met their criminal on a dating website. 39% met the criminal on social media. So when we talk about accountability, right, that's a big one. When we talk about individuals versus transnational crime rings, pig butchering is a transnational crime ring conducting that operation, and human trafficking on top of it, right? Because the individuals perpetrating these crimes are unfortunately human trafficked individuals. So a lot to unpack there. However, also with AI, that was mentioned as well. About a third of our participants think that AI was used during their scam. They talked to a celebrity. They talked to Keanu Reeves. They talked to Taylor Swift, right? Because AI is so good now, you just need a couple minutes of audio and video, right? And so they're further convinced. The top 3 reasons we asked our participants, you know, we run a recovery program, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But we asked our participants in this recovery program, hey, what was the cause that made you interact with this scammer? Number 1 is loneliness. We have a loneliness epidemic. Veteran or not, right? Military spouse or not, active service member. But isn't that something that, especially active duty, you're stationed away from family, from friends, loneliness, right? Number 2, scam awareness. So we talk education, but man, for years we've been talking about passwords and MFA and privacy settings, and yet we're being scammed more than ever. It's $1 trillion business, right? So something isn't happening. We are not teaching people how to critically interact and think with the internet. When a 16-year-old is ready to drive, do we throw them the keys and say, read the manual, good luck? No, right? We test them. We have conversations with them, right? We use our trusted network as well, right? If I'm an older individual, I should have a trusted network that's surrounding me and protecting me that I can say, hey, does this look legitimate to you? Hey, I'm really scared, right? Because when you're the target of a scam, you're freaking out, right? Or you're elated, right? And sometimes that outside perspective can really help you. And that's another thing my nonprofit does, is we can provide that outside perspective. So we have a recovery group. It's 10 weeks, mental health, financial help, legal help, all the whole shebang, because as a country, we don't have structured recovery for individuals who have actually lost their entire life savings. The median amount lost of our participant for a traditional romance fraud, $130,000. The median amount for a crypto investment is $230,000. Last week, I talked to an individual, 12 million. And that was the whole family, right? Because she said, oh my gosh, I have to get my parents in this. I have to get my children, college funds, retirements, everything got put into this. The whole family has no money now. She is suicidal, right? We have people coming to us suicidal and we're guiding them to resources. But we are a tiny nonprofit. I can't send people to the FTC or CFPB anymore. It's worthless, right? But we are tiny and we're trying our best. But again, so I want accountability, right? From social media, dating websites too, and cryptocurrency companies. Right now, they don't have to freeze funds unless they have a court order. So if it's traced, if a court order isn't presented to them, they don't have to freeze it. And also, freezing it doesn't necessarily mean the victim is getting that back. The restitution process, if your money is magically seized, takes years. So victims aren't getting money for years, and also they're only getting a fraction of their money back. And when you've lost 12 million, that matters.
Allie, just to reiterate, why can't a little nonprofit like you, who deals with veterans and others who were defrauded through crypto schemes, romance schemes, why can't you refer those cases to the FTC or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB?
So, sir, we do, but no actual help really comes from it, right? They want to talk to a human. They want an actual guided recovery.
So you refer them, but are these agencies doing anything?
To my knowledge, no. And so we also refer to the FBI, right? Report to ic3.gov. That's great. That's an electronic report. They never hear back, right? Nothing happens. No communication happens. And so this victim who has lost everything and who just wants to talk to a human, because now they're afraid of technology too, right? They're afraid to use technology. So that's why they want a human, right? They hear nothing back. It's a double victimization.
Well, I just wanted to just make sure we got on the record what this government is doing. So the CFPB has been basically, the staff has been obliterated there. We went through this whole issue, thing with Doge to root out, waste, fraud, and abuse. But there is tremendous fraud being perpetrated to the, you mentioned the average losses, the 100,000, the millions of dollars, but we're not equipping the government to protect American citizens. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Thank you. Dr. Dexter?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And it was a perfect segue to the question that I have for Mr. Chopra. Obviously, what we're hearing is deeply concerning, and the fact that the Office of Service Member Affairs at CFPB has been gutted is absolutely mind-blowing, considering what we are hearing right now. Mr. Chopra, can you speak to what you were doing in that office previously relative to the demand and the need? And I'm guessing it was insufficient then and relative to the cuts now. And how do we protect the CFPB and the OSA from this kind of impact if it's an executive branch agency? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, the command in the statute was the Office of Service Member Affairs was supposed to coordinate a lot of the consumer protection efforts on specific items such as auto sales, auto lending, but also more broadly. So what I directed that office to do, it was somewhat dormant when I arrived, but they had really lost a focus on actually mobilizing federal and state law enforcement on these major consumer protection issues. So I think that was part of pulling in the Justice Department, doing others. We also dispatched them, and I was very lucky to visit a lot of military installations across the country. My work focused more on spouses, but it was an ability to be able to create some degree of feedback loop. Was it enough? No. It's a relatively small agency compared to the VA or the DOJ, but it did surface for us a lot of very emerging issues early. So for example, when it came to pig butchering and the use of cryptocurrencies to defraud people. We were very early on that and were able to get certain things moving. We were quite early, as Will and others remember, on the Service Member Civil Relief Act overcharging schemes that were going on in student loans and some other places. So, you know, it was not a large group, but I think because the mortgage market was is so deep, has so many unique facets when it comes to veterans, student loans, others, it was very, very important. I will just share with you, 2 weeks ago, I think we heard the president advocate for an interest rate cap on credit cards. His CFPB is not even enforcing the interest rate cap for active duty service members. His CFPB is not enforcing anything related to the VA mortgage requirements. They're not doing anything related to visiting military installations. The main thing they have done for the Office of Service Member Affairs is to now call it servicemen rather than service member. That, I think, has been the major contribution that they've pursued.
If we can call that a contribution. If we can call that a contribution. Gretchen Peters, you've been waiting very patiently. Go ahead.
Just wanted to touch base again on the idea of naming and shaming organizations or creating a public lists of organizations. I think it's a great idea. But I also want to refer back to something that Mr. Villanueva said earlier, which was that for a lot of military families and veterans and again, Americans in general, will go to a search engine. They'll go to Google, they'll go to Bing, or they'll go on to Facebook or another platform and type in, you know, what it is they're looking for, whether it's medical support, mental health support, they need help with their benefits. And if platforms effectively today are allowed to let organizations self-identify. So I can go online and set up an organization and call it a pharmacy. And that's why 97% of pharmacies online are actually not really pharmacies. Yeah. I can go online and call myself a mental health provider. And that's why the vast majority of mental health providers online are fake. And same with a loan shark. You can go online and self-identify your organization as an accredited organization. And Google won't stop you. They won't even check. Neither will Microsoft. Now, those organizations can be mandated to do so because guess what? They're taking money from those organizations. Those are sponsored results that are coming up when a veteran searches for support finding their benefits. Those are sponsored results. They're in a business relationship with that loan shark when they take advertising money from them. And we can, that can be stopped. That ought to be stopped. And so I think it's a terrific idea, but let's look at the way that these bad actors operate online and make sure that you're from a very technical level understanding what the tricks that they're using to look legitimate, because that capacity to self-identify gives them an air of legitimacy online. Somebody's like, oh, this is a pharmacy in Canada. I can get my meds there. This is an accredited mental health institution. You know, I can go and take ayahuasca with them in Peru and it'll be great. That, you know, there's no one is stopping that from being on the internet.
So, Ms. Peters, as I continue on through my 60s, I notice a lot of social media content that comes to me about various health ailments and various claims. And so the lack of regulation of folks making health claims and not, where's the liability sort of rest with that? I mean, so
well, this is
presently, I mean, because you're pointing out to pharmacies, pharmacies that are fraudulent, mental health professionals, but then there are people who don't even claim that they're mental health professionals. They're just out there being influencers, claiming certain things about this or that.
We're getting into an issue where public safety bumps up against our First Amendment rights, which we all cherish. However, if you look through, centuries of jurisprudence on this issue, the First Amendment gives a wide, lenience, as it should, or wide freedoms towards freedom of expression, political expression, religious expression, and parody. You can impersonate somebody. This is why Saturday Night Live is a popular comedy show. You can impersonate our leaders for purposes of comedy and entertainment. But when it shifts into the purpose being fraud, that is not First Amendment protected speech, and it never has been. And so we can regulate against these issues of fraud and abuse and impersonation without impeding our First Amendment rights or the First Amendment rights of the American people to go online and express themselves and their political views. And so I think we need to change the conversation around those online issues from one, the tech industry will put lots of money into fighting this by claiming that people like me are trying to take away their First Amendment rights. We're trying to define the difference between criminal conduct and free expression. That's certainly possible to do.
Go ahead, Dr. Conaway.
This idea of getting after enforcement, I think of the use of, or at least the experimentation with the use of private right of action laws, empowering lawyers to go after these entities. A referral, somebody calls in and says they have been defrauded. It sits on a website, and understand there must be thousands upon thousands of these online applications and issues that have been raised. But there are folks who make a living, advancing someone's rights. And I don't know if there's a prohibition against referring people to a lawyer, if you hadn't thought to do that as you write to the DOJ. Your lawyer who will go after this case for you and try to get some recompense for what you have lost. Any thought on using private right of action in this space from anyone?
So real quick, one thing to be aware of in this is many of these contracts that are entered into for various things include a clause forcing the use of arbitration. And the reason why that chills all sorts of group claims, because those arbitrations are individualized, so no private attorney wants to take one kind of small case. They would want to be able to do it for a group. So I think that is part of something we should consider. Some of the laws that are consumer laws include an entitlement on a private right of action. So for example, the CFPB is responsible for enforcing that Electronic Fund Transfer Act. They're not doing it, but it includes a private right of action. So the banks are still reimbursing people when there's been fraudulent payment activity. Same is true for the Truth in Lending Act. An individual veteran can still challenge an illegal foreclosure because it has a private right of action. So I think we need to think through that. One of the things that was an important precedent is the Military Lending Act forbids forced arbitration clauses. And I think that is something that was a really important thing to do. And as we think about deterring wrongdoing for when targeting veterans, but especially active duty service members and dependents, I think restricting those kind of legal minutia that blocks people's access to the court is something you should think about.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Conaway. Very good question. That's what you got elected to do. Eileen Huck.
Thank you. I definitely agree that we need to take a systematic approach and focus on prosecution of these bad actors, but I think we also need to take a look at whether the DoD and VA in particular are adequately arming service members and veterans with the information they need to counter predatory lenders and fraudsters. My organization focuses primarily on the currently serving and, of course, currently serving service members who find themselves in financial difficulty, often face the additional risk of losing their security clearance and consequently their employment. And of course, the financial stability of a currently serving family directly translates into their successful transition into the civilian world as they leave the military. So there are certain points over the course of an active duty career where it would make sense to educate service members about their vulnerability to financial fraud, and I'm not sure that's happening at the moment. You think about the TAP, the Transition Assistance Program. It seems to me that that is the time that service members are learning quite a bit about the benefits that will be available to them through the VA. Are they also being educated about their vulnerability to predatory lenders and fraud and scams? I'm not sure that's the case currently. I did a very brief check of Military OneSource, which is the website to provide information and resources to currently serving military families. I searched for fraud, and one response came up, and it was a redirection to another government website. So I think that, while we pursue systemic responses, while we prosecute these bad actors, we need to do a lot more to make sure that our service members, military families, and veterans are aware of the threat to their financial security. I'm going to go home and tell my family that there's a whole scary world out there that I did not know about, and I think we need to do a lot better making sure that our service members, veterans, and military families are aware of these threats.
Eileen Huck, you talk about a better design for our transition, our TAP program, and I hadn't considered the fraud prevention that we could do, the education we could do in the transition. But I think about that 18-year-old, 19-year-old getting a salary for the very first time, maybe from a very impoverished family, having to deal with the financial services that exist around a base. And that's part of the origins of the CFPB. As we ramped up the war efforts in the early 2000s, these sorts of scams were coming to the fore, and part of the impetus to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau were these terrible stories. And so it seems it's not just the transition out of the military, it's actually basic training. This ought to be part of basic training for those young military service members. And then the loneliness that must accrue to spouses that are traveling with service members to bases that are abroad, the employment opportunities, that's what the multi-level, even in the recent show Boots on Netflix, it depicts a multi-level marketing scheme, and I hadn't thought that was actually thought that was relevant to our discussions, but I'm recalling that moment in the series. This committee is definitely involved in the TAPS. We have jurisdiction, joint jurisdiction with armed services, but the life cycle of the military service member, from induction all the way to veteran status, very senior veteran status, we all have to think about how we can better arm the veteran and their families to protect themselves, but also protect them at the same time. We have an obligation to protect them, but we also need to arm them with the information and the education to protect themselves. That's what I'm thinking. Go ahead, Ms. Donnelly.
Every time we bring up TAP in a committee hearing or a roundtable like this, I always have to push for the fact that, TAPS is one moment in time, and many people leaving the military aren't really paying attention. They're looking forward to the beer and seeing their friends. So we have to have some kind of app or information source that's all bundled together, all in one place. So when that person needs the information, it's available to them as soon as when they need it. So I just want to keep plugging away at that.
Kayla Williams.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chopra and Ms. Peters, I think, have done a fantastic job of really highlighting the ways in which veterans, service members, military families are part of the broader society, that we don't live distinct and outside of our communities. And so many of the solutions that are going to be best positioned to protect us are going to have to be taken at a much higher level. And at the same time, because we are a somewhat distinct community, communicating about these issues needs to be done in a tailored and thoughtful way. That the V-Safe program really made huge strides in trying to make improvements for us. I also want to touch on one other element that is at the borderline of being a scam and doesn't directly hurt veterans, but does waste taxpayer dollars, and that is Medicare Advantage plans that target veterans. With they claim to offer tailored benefits, and they have taglines that reference service, like to serve those who served. The reality is that the insurers know that veterans get most or all of their care at VA, and so this is wasting taxpayer dollars while not providing any additional benefit to veterans. So another way that folks are taking advantage of what veterans can bring to the table and not, in fact, trying to do anything to benefit them.
Are you saying the Medicare Advantage plans are well, they are sort of trying to rob veterans from, get veterans to leave VA care?
They're trying to get veterans to sign up for a benefit that they won't end up using.
And they may not know that they have that benefit, you know, and they'll get to
The Medicare
them
Advantage
first.
plans are doing it.
So the VA does the treatment and provides the medications, et cetera. But Medicare Advantage is being paid a per capita amount for that veteran. So it's pure profit. It's pure profit for the Medicare Advantage. It's double dipping.
But there are many, many plans that are by supposedly reputable companies, right, that have names that seem to imply that they're doing something specific for veterans. And it's just trying to extract taxpayer dollars.
So Kayla, I want you to know that this committee and the staff are aware of this issue. I have doctors on the committee who understand this issue, and we are taking to task and holding accountable the companies that are involved.
The Medicare disadvantage
as much as we can, the minority. As much as we can, but this is not a small amount of money. It's billions and billions and billions of dollars. Thank you for raising the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask one question?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So sorry. So I just want to acknowledge that nothing's going to happen imminently to protect our veterans, and we all have casework teams that, you know, veterans reach out to our offices. What would be the most effective way when somebody raises the alarm on fraud or they're worried that they're being defrauded? Where should we be funneling information, and how should we be responding to that in a way that actually helps us identify where these concerns are? That's for anybody.
Well, I think we're just kind
By
of
just
staring at each
saying
other.
that it's not, we are encouraging everyone, including veterans, to continue to report it to the federal agencies. We don't want to waste their time, but we do feel from an oversight perspective and also from a data perspective, it is going to need to be looked at when coming up with investigations, cases. I'm also, I get a lot of individual reach outs. I am encouraging people to report it to their state attorney general. Often those offices do have a unit that can do some intake. They can often talk to the person on the phone, and they do have a lot of interest in pursuing some of these cases. It's not as much as we would want, but I don't think we should ignore that. And frankly, I know there's a lot of reforms you are all thinking about. I urge you to quickly propose them. This issue of Medicare Advantage plans, I hope that we can push the state insurance commissioners to crack down on some of it. There's lots of ways that people are going to be watching what you are doing, and it's going to be a real guide to others in the states of where they might pursue reform. So we really all want to help you craft those.
Thank you for that last suggestion. Ali, a quick remark, and then I want to call on Rohit and then David for final comments, and then I'll sum up. But Ms. Browning and I have got to get to a delegation meeting, so go ahead.
Really quickly on reporting, that highlights the issue of reporting can be a mess, right? So we send people to ic3.gov, which is the FBI's site, because if there's ever a chance that you're going to get money back, it's through the FBI. But you can also report to the FTC, right? Local law enforcement, Attorney General. There's just a million places to report. We need a central location, if I could change something.
So final thoughts, very quickly, Mr. Chopra and then Mr. Case.
This has been very enlightening, and I think a lot of good issues have been raised here, and we will think of what we are not VA, we're the IG, we're independent, and can make recommendations that come out of our audits and inspections of healthcare facilities. And we will keep all this in mind, and I know my criminal investigators are listening, and so they will also keep these things in mind as well.
Mr. Chopra, any thoughts?
Well, let me just thank also the Office of the Inspector General for being here. The IGs are very, very critical in not just protecting taxpayers, but I think the public too. I hope that as a part of what we can all do to support you is, number one, what are the specific legislative changes with respect to holding more of these platforms accountable? I think that that really is going to make a big difference in terms of making sure we're deterring and freezing off the vectors by which a lot of this fraud can be perpetrated. But also, I really just want to thank people for raising the issue of the importance of the CFPB. This was a major, major area of expertise of the agency. We could tell you specifically military survivors, 18 to 24, their auto loan debt. I mean, there was a lot that we analyzed, and we kicked the tires on companies targeting those demographics, and it made a lot of difference. So I just so appreciate you, Ranking Member Takano, for continuing to push for that. And I hope that we can all think broadly, not just veterans, but service members, their dependents, survivors, and others, old, young, everyone in between. There really is a lot we have to do.
Well, thank you so much for that, Mr. Chopra. I want to thank all the participants again, really, for being here and for engaging in such a thoughtful discussion. And I look forward to continued collaboration to protect veterans, service members, and their families from predatory and bad actors seeking to profit off the benefits veterans have earned through their service and sacrifice. No one deserves to have their livelihoods or sometimes even their very identity stolen from them, especially those who have worn this nation's uniform to defend our freedoms. I will not rest until justice is served and all those that take advantage of veterans are held accountable. Thank you all. And with that, I've got to rush out of here and get to another meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for all of your service. I know it's not easy these days.
Yes. Yeah, it was someone, I was a law firm for many years. She was Angelique Garg, who went to work for the CFPB. Yeah. Yes. No,
A lot of people had great.
Yeah, no, but I think she got caught up in the bloodletting.
So I'm glad you guys can still do some.
Yeah.
This is what I do with my free time right now.
Oh, great.
President and CEO hold card, new job for the Hispanic Veterans Leadership Alliance. Is there anything we can do? Thanks as always. I think one thing that we need to remember on top of everything that's said is perfect is that on top of the vulnerable communities we talked about,
It's ratcheted up.
it's ratcheted up because you don't have the same access to information.
You can't ask.
Yeah, let me know what I find over this company. Sounds fun.